The Chapter 4 map is here, and it has got a ton of new locations. But first, do you remember that time way back in, like, Chapter 1 when Fortnite actually gave out the next Battle Pass to all players? If you want them to do that again, leave a like on the video right now. Also, subscribe because we are super close to a new milestone. But yes, guys, the Chapter 4 map is insane, and we've got a bunch of leaks about it. There's going to be old locations returning, as well as new locations that even have to do with, like, space and stuff. Oh, and by the way, the skin challenge on last video was the foundation, so here's a ton of people that got that right. This time around, comment below the name of this skin, and I'll feature a bunch of the ones that get that right. So starting out here, and before we reveal the locations that are going to be on this map, one of the biggest clues that has to do with Chapter 4 and the map is by looking at the previous chapters and each map that has come before it. Now, specifically, we need to look at the map names themselves, because if you didn't know, each individual map actually has a code name within the files. For example, Chapter 1 was called Athena, then when we moved on to Chapter 2, it was called Apollo. Chapter 3 was then Artemis, and it has already been leaked that the Chapter 4 map is going to have the code name Asteria. Now, what do you notice about all these names? For some reason, they actually start with the letter A. Now, that in and of itself isn't too interesting, but let's focus in on the name Asteria. According to Wikipedia, she was a titaness of the stars. The starry one is a daughter of the Titans Coas, Paulus, and Phoebe, which, that's very confusing. Could possibly point towards a skin, but when you compare it to the other names like Athena, who's from, like, Greek mythology, or Apollo, you start to see another trend, which also seems to coincide a lot with constellations and space itself, which we've seen in Fortnite multiple times. And even if you take a look at Donald Muster's Twitter as of recently, his banner has been updated to the 0 point showing up in space. Yet another reference to these constellations and the Chapter 4 map. Now, if we take a closer look at this image that Donald Mustard has put up, there's not a whole lot that you can take from it to get a clue for the Chapter 4 map, besides the fact that, well, the 0 point is in space, which is kind of different from it being at the bottom of the lake on the Chapter 3 map. And going back in time, this kind of reminds me of Chapter X, when Jonesy went into the 0 point and got teleported into space. It's like the same exact colors and everything, which is very peculiar and definitely could be a hint. Now, as of most recently, he has updated his banner to showcase this right here, which seems to show a brand new planet. It doesn't look like the current Fortnite planet. So does that actually mean that we're going to be leaving the current Fortnite world entirely and being transported onto an entirely new Fortnite planet? According to past seasons, all of the maps were on the same planet, especially with Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 literally being flipped sides of the same island. This planet theory actually holds quite a bit of water. Couple that with the fact that the 0 point was seen in space, and the names of the islands being relative to things in space as well, it seems to be a likely possibility. Now, if we also hop into game for a second and take a look at the Herald's Battle Pass menu, specifically her emote, something interesting can be seen. Obviously, we see her moving around this orb, but if we take a very close look at this orb itself, you'll see that it's not actually showing the Chapter 3 map. Now, I believe it actually changes, but right now, for me, it was showing the Chapter 2 map when the, what was that stuff? The orangish stuff was spreading around the map. The corruption from the cube, right? Which is very peculiar. Why would the Herald's emote be showing a Chapter 2 map? Now, again, though, that's not the only thing that can be shown. According to the leaked files for this, you can see multiple instances of both the Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 map. Like, for example, the flooded variant of the map is in the bottom left corner, which again just brings up the question of why. I mean, for one, it does make sense because it technically has both sides of the island with that inner area, but it doesn't explain the different variants of each map. Now, this could actually be hinting at something else entirely. If we go back to the end of the season event, the Fracture event that is coming up soon, the name Fracture has inspired quite a few theories that definitely seem to be pretty likely. One of which is that the new map is actually going to be fragments of the previous 3 maps mashed together into one. Now, this actually makes a ton of sense when you think about it, because we already know that after the event itself, we're going to be awarded a back bling called the 0 Fragment, which is supposedly a fragment of the 0 point itself. Not only that, the description for that, like we talked about in my previous video, is initiating 0 fusion. So could that be hinting at the fusion of, like, all 3 of the previous maps into 1 with a bunch of returning points of interest. And I mean, we've already seen a bunch of points of interest return. Like, for example, this season, it was kind of a big clue, but nobody really talked about the fact that the Loot Lake house just randomly returned this season. I mean, that's pretty big. We haven't seen it since chapter 1, and it was one of the main points of interest during that whole chapter. Also, Tilted Towers returned, but for the most part, those are the two areas that we actually got to see return onto the map. Oh, and can't forget about Greasy Grove, even though it got like completely destroyed. But that really only leaves a few options from the chapter 1 map that we haven't seen return. Like, for example, maybe Lucky Landing or the Vikings Village. Maybe even, what was the name of the swamp location? I could definitely see that. Or even like the Gus racetrack. There definitely are still a few options. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be exclusively just old locations because that wouldn't be too cool, right? So let's talk about some brand new locations as well. If this space theory continues to be true, it could make sense that we'd see like low gravity zones, like for example, a crater type location where we could jump around a ton. This also makes a lot more sense because back in chapter 2, there was a mini event involving a spaceship that never was fully explained. In fact, it just kind of happened and then Fortnite seemingly forgot about it. Was this a hint all along? I mean, the amount of detail they put into this event and how the spaceship landed on the map, I would have expected a lot more to come out of it. Not only that, this was an official concept from Epic Games that they never added into the previous maps. Could it be because they're saving it for this next map? I mean, it would make a very cool location. It's got this like radioactive type vibe to it, which could open up for some very interesting gameplay mechanics. Maybe you get like special powers from the radioactive goo. I don't know, but it would be pretty cool. And also, there's been other concepts made by the community so far. Like, for example, this one from FN Chief Aiko, which showcases a bunch of different locations, such as a Slurp Splash Park. That would be such a cool spot. Imagine a water park location. Oh my goodness. But you can see here that his concept also has returning places like Viking Village, Lucky Lagoon, granted changed up a little bit, and maybe even a collab location for Star Wars. But guys, that's not the only thing. According to leaks, we have a bunch of names for locations on the brand new map. Like, for example, one of which is simply titled Prison, which, going back to the idea that we're going to see a bunch of locations return, we could see the OG prison from chapter 1 return as a location during chapter 4. Not only that, we also have one called Camp, which could be that, well, camp location also in chapter 1. I forget the exact name of it. It was something Lodge, right? Man, it's been so long. Not only that, there's also a mansion, which reminds me of that same location that was near the campground that was used as a superhero base way back when. In fact, all three of these locations are really similar on the chapter 1 map, which is very peculiar. Another idea that has been floating around is that the next map could actually be all three of the maps just simply split together, so you've got a complete mix of everything. I'm honestly not sure what I think of this idea, but it would be pretty fun to play on, not gonna lie. But on top of that, we also got locations like Farm, Forest Ruins, which that in and of itself is really intriguing. What type of ruins are going to be in there? Is it going to be similar to the Indiana Jones spot? That would make sense, right? But on top of that, there's even one like the Hydro Power Station, which seems to remind me back of that radioactive location that was shown as concept art. So overall, there are a ton of different locations that already seem to be confirmed, pointing towards this map in fact being a mix of a lot of chapter 1 locations. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe and also check out my previous videos on chapter 4 info, like for example, going over a bunch of live event stuff that you got to see. But again, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.